All right, I'm going to try and come up with examples. We did the four quadrants of knowing and unknowing. That's the known knowns, the known unknowns, the unknown knowns, and the unknown unknowns. And one of the quadrants gave everybody a lot of trouble, which is the unknown knowns. And I think I've got two examples, but we'll try it, right? So if we look at this, right, the four quadrants, really, it's the known knowns, where we know the constraints and we know the values of those constraints. It's information we knew we needed, and we know the values of that information. We know the information required to satisfy that constraint. The next one is we have known unknowns, and those are known constraints, but we don't know the value. We know that we need to understand something, right? And so this is information we knew we needed, but we don't know the value yet. But because we know we need it, we're going to go out and find out what it is, right? I'm going to build a bridge. I need to understand what the dirt looks like under the water so we know whether we can build this thing or what we got to do. I don't know what the dirt underneath the water looks like right now. Boom. All right. Then I'm going to do unknown unknowns. Those are things we didn't know enough to know we needed, right? I'm going to give an example later. So it's information that we didn't know we needed. Unknown constraint with an unknown value. And then there's the last one, which really gave everybody indigestion, probably because I did a horrible job explaining it, and that's the unknown knowns. Information we knew, but it was not surfaced through normal means, right? So these are unknown constraints, but we know the values of. So we could have a SME that we didn't know existed. We could have had a previous legal decision and somebody knew it, or we had compliance documentation, but none of the new people knew to ask it, right? And there's a compliance group and nobody knew they were there. Those kinds of things, right? That's the one that gave people indigestion. I'm hoping the two examples I've got help. And so the first one we're going to do is a medical one, right? So this person needs surgery or they have a medical problem. The known. We need to know where the problem is to do surgery. And so that's the constraint. We're going to do surgery on this. We think there's a problem. We need to know where exactly to do the surgery so we can be as little invasive as possible. In this case, we might have an MRI that shows the problem area, right? So that's a known. We know we need to know where we're going to do the surgery in the abdomen, and we know the value of where that location is through because we gathered data about it, in this case through an MRI or some kind of test, right? And then we have the known unknowns in this surgery. We need to know the severity of the problem. And we don't really know that initially. We think we know. And it could, the reason we might not know the value is the test we ran didn't show it, right? The MRI might not show how big an abscess, I just made that up, I don't know, how big it is. So in that case, we might run, we know we need to know the size. We have two options. We can do exploratory for it, or we can run additional tests that may not work, right? And a lot of times we will run additional tests. We will convert that known constraint. We need to know the severity to plan on what kind of technique we're going to use or how long to take, or do we need backup surgeons? I don't know, anything else, right? So in that case, the good news is we know we need to know something, and we may pick a couple alternate paths to gather the data required to cover that constraint. And then we have the unknown unknowns and the unknown knowns. So unknown knowns, actually, the medical example was pretty easy, right? You have an allergy. It turns out the person has an allergy to some kind of drug. And they even get asked that, and they don't think it's important. I forgot when I was a kid, this drug nearly killed me. People do that all the time. So in this case, or this person had a similar problem in the past, and it required a certain kind of treatment or may have muddled their insides or something, and they didn't tell the doctor about it, right? So that's an unknown known. The doctor doesn't know that there is a constraint or an issue, but the patient did, and they didn't surface it, right? And then so to me, that's the one that always gets us, the unknown knowns. It's something that is known somewhere but not gathered, or maybe not even asked. And then we have the unknown unknowns. In this case, we could have some condition and the person has some hereditary issue, and I actually know somebody this happened to. The doctors decided there was a major problem. The test showed it, and it turned out there was a hereditary condition that could cause the same symptoms almost identically, and nobody thought about there being a hereditary condition for this, although they probably should have, right? But in this case, nobody thought of it. The patient didn't know they had a hereditary condition. It was rare. And so we had unknown. I actually went to do surgery, and there wasn't actually a problem because it was related to some hereditary condition, right? So those are the four quadrants: known knowns, known unknowns, unknown unknowns, and unknown knowns. And the arrows are here really to just give you a feel for the direction we generally drive this, right? We're trying to drive everything in the problem to the known place. So if we know that we have certain constraints on the problem, like, we need to know where the severity is. We need to know the exact location, those kinds of things. In this medical example, we would try and do more tests to drive that into the known knowns column. So generally, we drive in the directions of the arrows. If you're in the unknown unknowns, sometimes you determine it accidentally. That will drive it into the known unknowns. And sometimes you will get an expert on board and they will drive it straight diagonally into the known columns. But I'm going to assume for simplicity that doesn't happen. So that's that example, a medical example. I got one more example for this. I actually you see this all the time. It's sort of like you never want to be the first person to be the house the builder built the first time. And also your first house you build, man, you always make mistakes, right? And it's because there was stuff you didn't know about. So known knowns. If I'm building a house, I know I need to have a plan. And I found some blueprints and they look good. And so now I know kind of what this house's size is going to be and what the floor plan is going to look like and where the outlets are going to be because I have a plan. Those are known knowns. And it turns out when you're building a house, that isn't enough, right? So we have a known constraints and unknown values, right? That's the known unknowns. I'm moving into the green square here. We need to decide the cabinet and floor types. Like if I don't pick those, I don't know what the pricing is. So I know there's a constraint that I have a constraint on price and I've got a constraint on needing cabinets and flooring, and I haven't picked any values for that, so I don't know the price. We don't know what the shipping is going to look like. I actually may not want to start the house until I make those decisions because of the lead times. I may end up having to check lead times on those products. So those are known unknowns. We know we're going to have cabinets. We know we're going to have flooring. And so we need to work through moving those items from that quadrant into the blue quadrant, assuming you're not, you can see blue. Known knowns, right? And then I've seen this before. It's the unknown knowns. So I want solar power. And it turns out I didn't know this, but the solar company knew. Did I ask if we actually had this happen on a house. If I rotated the house for a better southern exposure, the power, the value of those solar panels would go way up. I didn't know to ask that question. But the solar company knew the answer and could tell me when we put it together, the estimate, they could tell me how much power I would get. Right? But I didn't know to ask, hey, this house isn't even built yet. Is there anything I can do to increase the power on this? So once it's built, we can't do that. That wouldn't be an unknown known, right? They would just do the power estimate and that would become a known known when they gave it to us. But as an unknown known, the power company knew that it would be better for me to site this thing on a hill, not on the backside of the hill and with a southern facing. I actually had this with driveways. I always want a southern facing driveway now because the snow melts off, as long as we still have snow. Because the snow melts off, right? And so the first house I moved in, I didn't even know facing would matter. And then I saw my neighbor's house was covered in snow. Their driveway's always covered in ice, right? So, and then we have the unknown unknowns in the house. I've seen this before too. They're going to go build a house. We get a plan, they buy the lot, nobody bothered to check, and it turns out there's a water and sewer moratorium, right? Nobody thought to check it. Nobody had experience with a moratorium because you were doing it all yourself. You were your own contractor. So you had no idea that could be a problem. And that might be an unknown known there, right? Because somebody knew that there was a moratorium on. Like by the time we got our permit, they should have told us, or maybe the builder or whatever, but maybe they thought we took care of it. So it was an unknown unknown that there were no sewer hookups available. I actually saw this in a house, in a yard we looked at. It would have cost us like 10, 20 grand to run a sewer line, right? Because there wasn't one at the lot, actually. And we didn't even know to ask that because we'd never lived in a neighborhood that didn't have sewer. So that's the four categories: known knowns, known unknowns, unknown knowns, unknown unknowns. I picked four super simple examples. One of those might two examples with 4 quadrants each. Hopefully one of those will resonate with you, and that will be a better walkthrough than the last one. Have a great day.